Whenever I think about this episode in particular involving Mr. Gar's feelings towards Carol, who is the mother of KO, gave me an appreciation of the fact that ever since I've watched more and more of this show, especially the episode involving Mr. Gar and Carol having a picnic together, then it really shows the passion behind these episodes, especially the characters themselves. The episode begins with the characters facing off Steenborg in a battle, which leads to Steenborg nearly punching Mr. Gao, only to have him having a flashback with his teamwork relationship with Carol during the glory days. When Mr. Gar, also known as Elbow, has the chance to hang out with Carol, known as Silver Spark, in a mission which resolves the team splitting up, with the other team staying at headquarters, it gave him the chance to hang out with her, only to notice that she has romantic feelings towards Laser Blast. In all honesty, the more I think about this and the fact that Mr. Gar desperately wants to hang out Carol by any means necessary, everyone will probably be in his max no matter what. The more I think about it, it really feels real that before Mr. Gar became a hot-tempered boss, he became a little shy around Carol. It really feels weird to think about, knowing for a while that he doesn't release his temper out of anyone, but at the same time, I'm going to assume that throughout the years after the glory days, his personality changed either for the best or for the worse. Here's my opinion towards Mr. Gar. Considering that I have mixed opinions when it comes to hot-tempered characters, he actually feels a lot more accurate, even though that his temper might have gone out of nowhere throughout the years ever since the glory days came to an end. And to be real with you, seeing him being mostly humorous is honestly somewhat of an accomplishment, knowing full well that he can be nice at some points despite being a little critical, but at the same time we're mostly critical. His romantic feelings towards Carol is really unexpected to me. Like, the first time I seen it, I honestly thought it was gonna be a running gag, but since that we got backstory involving these two when it comes to the glory days, it really shows. Especially since that Carol realized that what Mr. Gar did in the past was basically his disabilities that got in the way. It just goes to show that superheroes, mostly ex-superheroes, has disabilities, especially since that Mr. Gar didn't mean to get Laser Blast disappeared. I'm still binge watching this show, and I still haven't gotten to the third season, but I just learned that during my research involving Laser Blast, it's been revealed that he could be the father of KO, and the reason why I say he could be is because I didn't do a lot of research into it. I just mostly looked up on his character in preparation for this review, and considering that Carol's romantic feelings towards Laser Blast is an indication onto why she isn't in love with Mr. Gar, goes to show that love at first sight isn't really a thing that is really common when it comes to it taking full effect for characters like Mr. Gar. But in all honesty, Mr. Gar's feelings throughout this episode, especially since that he wants to hang out with Carol by any means necessary, just goes to show that he really cares about her, even though that she's in love with another person. And for me personally, the fact that he was one of the reasons onto why Laser Blast went into a black hole really makes it difficult for him to be in love with Carol a lot more compared to the other times he encountered her. When it came to the Steenborg battle that he and the others are encountering, just goes to show that he just wants to set things right, but at the same time, his past comes back to haunt him a lot more, knowing full well that he just wasted Silver Spark or Carol's time in the past, and he may do the same thing here. knowing full well that he isn't really confident enough to handle stuff with Carol by his side. Even if I'm fully aware that Elbow has attributes when it comes to saving the city back in the glory days, it really feels like that this show's version of the glory days is a lot more interesting, knowing full well that this was before Lord Boxman was a huge threat when it comes to the series, and considering that the world building in the present day of the show is a lot normal compared to the glory days, just goes to show that a lot has changed, especially when it came to Carol and Mr. Gar. Just before Laser Blast went into a black hole, Mr. Gar gave or shared his sandwich to Carol to the point that he really wants to show his support towards Carol, even though that he's fully aware that he won't be able to get her, especially since that this led to him distracting her just around the time where Laser Blast disappeared into a black hole. This moment alone showcases the disabilities that Mr. Gar has, and for me personally, the fact that Carol told to Mr. Gar point blank that this is all his fault, while he drops the sandwich in the floor, really hurts Mr. Gar to the point that it really shows that throughout all those years after the glory days, especially becoming the boss of KO, Enid, and Rad, he can't be able to win what he really wanted during the glory days. You can't really blame Mr. Gar for stalling since that he didn't mean to, but at the same time you can't blame Carol for blaming Mr. Gar for stalling to the point that she lost Laser Blast, the person that she loves the most. It's really difficult for both characters since that they're mostly in the wrong, and the fact that Mr. Gar just couldn't be able to keep his emotions to himself during the moments that danger is approached. And considering it took this long for Carol to realize it was an accident, especially during the heat of the moment, she really felt like that she was slightly harsh on Mr. Gar, even though at the same time that they were still mostly in the wrong. And believe me when I say this, it's really believable to think that Mr. Gar is willing to get a chance from Carol when it came to the picnic episodes later on. Granted, the climax had to be cut short due to the flashback, but considering that Carol and Mr. Gar were ex-superheroes, it goes to show that without them, KO, Enid, and Rad won't be able to take down the enemy by themselves, which is why that the power of Mr. Gar and Carol somewhat works at the end when it comes to them reconciling. There were alternatives I could have picked for an occasion involving Valentine's half month, but considering this episode felt the best out of all of them, it really feels like I really need to discuss Mr. Gar's character, especially his past when it comes to the glory days with his partnership with Carol. To be real with you, I'm not a shipper in this show, but at the same time, the relationship between Mr. Gar and Carol is honestly one of the most underrated highlights in this entire show, which really shows that when it comes to the relationships I've witnessed, especially when it came to Red Action and Enid, I have to admit when it comes to romantic relationships, this is definitely on top when it comes to the execution. Granted, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to talk about this in the future, but at the same time, only time will tell as usual, but it's always a chance that I might talk about something else in this show, since that there's a lot to discuss involving OKKO. I'm giving this episode a 7.25 out of 10.